What happens when Mazda has a runaway hit on their hands with the Miata, and then the rest of the world is left scrambling to bring back a sporty roadster? You get the Honda Civic del Sol. Last year, we looked at the latest generation of Honda Civic and marveled how good the small car has gotten. Being 10 generations deep, of course, we would have tons of variants and oddballs over the years. And this, right here, is one of those oddballs. This is a 1993 Honda Civic del Sol, Honda's answer to the runaway success of the Miata. At the time, convertibles were seemingly on their way out, as there was large concerns about safety with them. But Mazda proved that a small, inexpensive, fun roadster could sell like hotcakes. Of course, not wanting to miss out on the sun-based fun, Honda took their 5th generation Civic, chopped off everything behind the doors, and made this funky little targa-topped oddity. The 5th generation Honda Civic was introduced in 1991, and introduced the world to the rounded look that proudly announced that the 1990s was here. A year later, the Del Sol was introduced as a 1993 model. The intention was a replacement for the much-loved CRX hatchback, as well as compete with the previously mentioned Miata. Honda really went to town on the design in the back, evoking the thought of being a mid-engine sports car like a Toyota MR2 or Pontiac Fiero, while being a front-engined, front-wheel drive sports car. And the name, Del Sol, Spanish for of the sun, screams, let's go have some summertime fun. Of course, despite this really sporty reared profile, it's not a mid-engine car. It is a front-wheel drive, front-engine Civic, after all. But this does provide a service, as the trunk is extremely large for such a sporty car. With the spare tire removed, I was truly tempted to see if I would fit. Unlike the Pontiac Solstice, which was a rear-wheel drive car, the Del Sol has a surprisingly amount of room inside. I was comfortable, and my fat ass had plenty of room to stretch out. And that's the beauty of the Del Sol. It's a Civic from the front seats forward. If you fit in a Civic perfectly fine, then you'll fit in the Del Sol. Another thing that helps with the space is the fact that it's a front-wheel drive car. While the Solstice had to make room for its longitudinally placed transmission, drive shaft, and rear end, all that stuff is instead transversely mounted and out of the way of the Del Sol. And having the rear struts allows for the trunk floor to be mounted as low as they needed it to be, providing all the space you need to go on trips. The Del Sol was initially offered in 2 models in the United States, the base S and the slightly sportier SI. The main difference between those two is the engines, with the S getting the 1.5-liter D15B7 4-cylinder, and the SI getting the 1.6-liter D16Z6 4-cylinder that provided Honda's famous VTEC variable valve timing. 1994 would get an even hotter model, being aptly named VTEC. While the other 2 models had 102 horsepower, 98 foot-pounds of torque, and 125 horsepower and 106 foot-pounds of torque, the VTEC model produced 160 horsepower and 111 foot-pounds of torque. Another differentiating factor was S models came with drum brakes in the rear, while SI and VTEC models had disc brakes. And of course, SI and VTEC models had much improved creature comforts and suspension. And Honda really did mean for this to be a replacement for the much-loved CRX. In Japan, it was known as the CRX Del Sol, and in Australia, it was known simply as the CRX. In America, it was most definitely marketed as an extension of the famous Civic line. However, after 2 years, the Civic was dropped from the name, and it was sold simply as the Honda Del Sol in an attempt to market it as its own sporty model. Not that it made a difference, as the Del Sol always struggled to sell. Almost 26,000 sold in 1993, down to 21,000 in 1994, before sales really started dipping in 1995 with 14,000, and then almost 8,500 in 1996, and then finally bottoming out at 5,603 in 1997. The Del Sol had failed, and despite outliving the 5th gen Civic by 3 model years, Honda didn't feel the need to build a 2nd generation Del Sol based off the 6th generation. Instead, Honda had a better idea. They decided to double down on the Roadster idea and gave us a true Miata competitor, the S2000, in 1999. Now, this particular 1993 Honda Civic Del Sol S is a very, very early model. Car number 288 built off the Suzuka Japan line. In fact, the first 300 Del Sols was sent out to dealers and shows to build excitement for the new sporty Honda. This is one of those first cars. And honestly, not many of those original 300 survived. In fact, there's only 7 of these cars known to be registered in the United States today. And being a numbers guy, that fact of being such an early build car is just...
I just think they're neat.
Now I will normally get into ride impressions, but I will boldly state this is a highly modified Honda Civic Del Sol. The car is fun and tossable as you expect out of a small roadster, but keep in mind, like many Civics, this one has been modified to the owner's content. Modifications include DNA automotive coilovers with DNA aluminum A-arms, a mini-me engine build that took the stock 1.5-liter block and put the 1.6-liter head on, with billet crank and billet rods, true cold air intake, skunk tube, throttle body, and intake. Of course, this gave an estimated output of around 300 horsepower, naturally aspirated. A P2R exhaust, 14-inch Acura disc brakes in the front with the intentions of converting the rear to Acura discs in the near future, a racing clutch and short throw shifter, highly custom paint job, using a really cool method that takes a chemical compound found in fertilizer that essentially recreates a fisheye effect in the form of this crystal formation. Of course, stickers galore, and this neat carbon fiber trunk shelf. And of course, there's so many, I'm sure I'm missing some. Going back to the drive, it took me about a full minute of struggling to get this car off the line and a lot of coaxing from the owner to finally get me to properly drive this car. It wants to shift between 3,000 and 4,000 RPMs. You try to baby it and it'll be struggling and it'll flat out die on you like it did to me multiple times. Hammer on the thing like it wants you to and it'll slide into gear all day long. This is simply a byproduct of trying to drive a highly modified car. As much as I don't like hammering on someone else's car, it finally came to a realization that this isn't a stock car. The owner made this car to hammer on in the drag strip. So, he finally got me to hammer on it, and the car performed flawlessly for the rest of the drive. Overall, this car has many, many man-hours put into it, and for very good reason. The owner recently went through a health scare, and while out of work, he had this car to work on. The months of being sick and recovering, not knowing if he was going to live or not, just working on this car kept him sane. It gave him a purpose. And you gotta really appreciate that. This is more than a car to him. This is an expression of his soul. This car is the really embodiment of how cars mean so much more than just a tool to get from point A to point B. And honestly, I don't blame him. And he has big plans for the future for this car. Most notably being a Pro Charger kit that he intends on applying during the wintertime. And say what you want about the tuner look of the car. This car is his baby. This heart and soul on a canvas. This car means so much more to him than just being a project car. This car got him through a rough time. This car is quite literally his heart on his sleeve. And I think that's a good spot to stop on. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for watching another episode of Wookie Drives. Huge shout out to Joe of Kannapolis, North Carolina for letting me drive your baby for my crappy internet car show. If you have a car in the Charlotte, North Carolina area that you'd like to have on the show, please DM my Twitter page at WookieAutomoTV. Be sure to give that page a follow and visit and like the Facebook page at facebook.com/Wookie Drives for updates and random banter. Be sure to give this video a like and hit that sub button for more crappy Wookie content. Anyways, thank you for watching and have a good one.
Presenting the new Civic Del Sol from Honda. It's a sporty, open-top car with a very remarkable feature. When it's windy outside, it's not so windy inside.